The moon had no name. It was just a number in a long list of numbers. Most salvagers never came here because there was nothing to find. But Tejo was not like most salvagers. He followed the strange signals that others ignored. He went to places that others feared. His small ship landed on the gray dust. The ground was cold and dead. Nothing grew here. Nothing lived here. The sky above was black, filled with distant stars that did not care about this forgotten place. Tejo checked his oxygen tank and stepped outside. His boots left deep marks in the soft ground. The wind was silent because there was no air to carry sound. He could only hear his own breathing inside his helmet. The signal came from the east. He walked toward it, climbing over small hills of rock and dust. His scanner beeped faster as he got closer. Something was definitely here. Something big. Then he saw it. A ship lay broken on the ground. It was not a human ship. The design was strange and beautiful, with curved metal that looked like flowing water. The color was deep purple, now covered with dust and burn marks. Smoke still rose from the broken engines. Tejo had seen alien ships before. In his 32 years of life, he had learned that the galaxy was full of different creatures. Some were friendly. Some were dangerous. Most just wanted to be left alone. He walked around the crashed ship slowly. The damage was severe. Whatever happened, it happened fast. There were blast marks on the hull. Someone had attacked this ship. Someone had wanted the people inside to die. Tejo found an opening in the side of the ship. The metal was torn apart, creating a hole big enough for him to enter. He turned on his flashlight and stepped inside. The inside of the ship was dark and cold. Emergency lights flickered red, casting strange shadows on the walls. The air was thin but breathable. Tejo removed his helmet carefully and took a breath. It smelled like burning metal and something else. Something sweet, like flowers. He moved deeper into the ship. The hallways were narrow and curved. Everything was designed for beings smaller than humans. Tejo had to bend his head to avoid hitting the ceiling. He found bodies. 2 of them lay in what looked like a control room. They were Valorians. Tejo recognized them from his years of traveling. They were a peaceful race, known for their silver skin and gentle nature. They never fought wars. They never hurt anyone. They were scientists and artists, not warriors. These 2 were dead. Their silver skin had turned gray. Their eyes were closed forever. Tejo felt sadness in his heart. What kind of monster would attack such gentle beings? He continued searching the ship. His duty was to report this to the authorities. They would want to know about the attack. They would want to investigate. Then he heard something. It was soft, almost impossible to hear. A small sound, like a whisper. Tejo stopped moving and listened. There it was again. Coming from behind a closed door. He tried to open the door, but it was locked. The control panel was broken. Tejo pulled out his tools and worked on the wires. After a few minutes, the door slid open, with a weak sound. What he saw inside made his heart stop. A Valorian female lay on the floor. She was dead, like the others. Her silver skin was cold and still. But that was not what shocked Tejo. In her arms, pressed against her lifeless chest, was a child. The little girl was alive. Her small body shook with fear. Her violet eyes were wide and wet with tears. She looked up at Tejo with terror, holding her dead mother tighter. Tejo dropped to his knees slowly. He did not want to scare her more. The child was so small, maybe 4 or 5 years old in human terms. Her silver skin was dirty and covered with dried tears. Her dark purple hair was messy and tangled. She opened her mouth and made a sound. It was not a word that Tejo understood. It was her language, the language of her people. But he understood the meaning. She was telling him to go away. She was protecting her mother, even though her mother was already gone. Tejo felt tears forming in his own eyes. How long had this child been here? How many hours or days had she spent holding her mother's dead body? Waiting for someone to come? Waiting for help that never arrived? He reached out his hand slowly. The child screamed and pressed herself closer to her mother. The sound was high and sharp, full of pain and fear. Teho pulled his hand back. He sat on the floor, keeping his distance. He would not force her. He would not grab her and carry her away. She had already lost everything. He would not take away her dignity, too. He started to speak. His voice was soft and calm. He told her his name. He told her he was a friend. He told her he would not hurt her. She did not understand his words. But maybe she could understand his tone. Maybe she could feel that he meant no harm. Minutes passed. The child watched him with those big violet eyes. Her crying became softer. Her shaking became less. She was still scared, but something in her was starting to trust this strange creature sitting on the floor. Teho took off his jacket. It was warm and soft, made from good material. He placed it on the floor between them, like an offering. The child looked at it with curiosity. More time passed. Teho did not move. He just sat and waited. Patience was something he had learned long ago. Some things could not be rushed. Some things needed time. Finally, the child moved. She released her grip on her mother's body just a little. Her small hand reached out toward the jacket. She touched it carefully. Feeling the soft fabric, Teho smiled gently. It was a small victory, but it was something. The child was beginning to see that he was not a threat. He pointed to himself and said his name again. Then he pointed to her and raised his eyebrows in question. She stared at him for a long moment. Then, in a voice as soft as falling leaves, she spoke a word. It was her name. Teho could not pronounce it correctly. The sounds were too different from human speech. But he tried. And when he said it wrong, something amazing happened. The child almost smiled. It was tiny. It disappeared almost instantly. But it was there. A small light in all this darkness. Teho knew he could not leave her here. The rules said he should report this and let the authorities handle it. The rules said humans should not interfere with alien matters. The rules said many things, but the rules had never seen a child holding her dead mother in a broken ship on a nameless moon. The rules did not know about the tears in those violet eyes. The rules did not understand that sometimes being human meant breaking rules. Teho made his decision. He would take this child with him. He would find a way to help her. He did not know how. He did not know what would happen. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not abandon her. He held out his hand one more time. The child looked at her mother's face for a long moment. She whispered something in her language. A goodbye. Perhaps. A promise to remember. Then, slowly, she reached out and took Teho's hand. Her fingers were cold and small. They wrapped around his rough hand like tiny flowers gripping a stone. Teho stood up carefully, lifting the child with him. She weighed almost nothing. As they walked out of the ship, the child looked back one last time. Her mother lay still on the floor, finally at peace. The child did not cry anymore. She just held on to Teho and let him carry her into the unknown. Outside, the stars still burned in the black sky. The universe was vast and cold and did not care about one small child or one human man. But Teho cared. And sometimes, that was enough. He carried her to his ship and stepped inside. The door closed behind them, shutting out the cold and the death. A new chapter was beginning. Neither of them knew what it would bring, but they would face it together. The ship was called the Wanderer. It was old but reliable. Teho had owned it for 8 years, and it had never failed him. The metal walls were scratched and worn, but the engines were strong. It was home. His crew was waiting when he returned. There were 3 of them. Jiho was the pilot, a thin man with sharp eyes and quick hands. Unbi was the engineer, a woman who could fix anything with wire and hope. Dohun was the youngest, only 23, responsible for communications and scanning. They all stopped talking when they saw what Teho was carrying. The child clung to his chest, her face hidden against his shoulder. She was wrapped in his jacket, only her silver hair visible. She had not made a sound since they left the crashed ship. Jiho spoke first. His voice was careful, like he was talking to someone who had lost their mind. He asked Taeho what he was doing. He asked where the child came from. He asked if Taeho understood what this meant. Taeho walked past him without answering. He carried the child to the small medical room and set her down on the bed. She immediately curled into a ball, pulling the jacket over her head like a shield. The crew followed him. They stood in the doorway, watching with worried faces. Eunbi asked if the child was hurt. Dohun asked if they should call someone. Jiho asked again what Taeho was thinking. Taeho finally turned to face them. His face was tired, but determined. He told them what he had found. He described the crashed ship, the dead Valorians, the attack that had destroyed everything. He told them about finding the child holding her mother's corpse. The room was silent when he finished. Jiho was the first to speak again. His voice was harder now. He reminded Taeho about the regulations. Humans were not allowed to take alien children. There were procedures for this. There were authorities who handled these situations. Taking her was illegal. Taeho listened to everything. Then he asked Jiho a simple question. He asked what the authorities would do with her. Jiho hesitated. Everyone knew the answer. The authorities would put her in a facility. They would study her. They would try to find her people. But the Valorians lived far away, on the other side of the galaxy. It would take years to contact them. Years that this child would spend alone in a cold room, surrounded by strangers in white coats. Eunbi stepped forward. Her voice was softer than Jiho's. She said she understood Taeho's feelings, but this was dangerous. If anyone found out, they would all go to prison. Their licenses would be taken. Their lives would be ruined. Taeho nodded slowly. He knew all of this. He had thought about it during the walk back to the ship. He had considered every consequence, every danger, every problem. And he had still made his choice. He told them they did not have to stay. If they wanted to leave, he would not stop them. He would drop them at the nearest station and continue alone. This was his decision, and he would not force anyone to share the risk. Dohun looked at the small figure on the bed. The child had uncovered her face just slightly. Her violet eyes peeked out from under the jacket, watching everything with fear and confusion. She was so small, so fragile, so alone. He asked Taeho what he would call her. Taeho had not thought about that. Her real name was impossible for human mouths to say. She needed a new name, something he could call her, something she could learn to respond to. He looked at her silver hair and violet eyes. She was like a flower growing in darkness, beautiful despite everything that had tried to destroy her. He thought about the flowers his mother used to grow in their small garden back on Earth. There was one she loved most, a white flower that bloomed even in winter. Nari. He would call her Nari. The child heard the name and tilted her head. The sound was strange to her, but not unpleasant. She repeated it softly, testing it on her tongue. The human word felt different from her own language, but there was something warm about it. Jiho sighed deeply. He rubbed his face with his hands, a gesture he always made when he was frustrated. He reminded everyone that this was insane. He said they were salvagers, not parents. He said they knew nothing about raising an alien child. He listed all the things that could go wrong, but even as he spoke, his voice was losing its edge. He was looking at Nari, at her tiny hands gripping the jacket, at her eyes full of tears that had not yet fallen. He was seeing what Taeho had seen, a child who needed help, a child who had no one else. Eunbi made the next decision. She walked to a storage cabinet and pulled out a blanket. It was old and faded, but it was soft. She brought it to the bed and placed it next to Nari. Not on her, not touching her, just nearby, in case she wanted it. Nari watched Eunbi carefully. Then, very slowly, she reached out and touched the blanket. She pulled it toward herself and held it against her chest. It was warmer than the jacket. It smelled different from everything on the Valorian ship. It smelled like the humans, like this new place that was strange but not scary. Do-hun smiled. He said that Nari was smart. She knew good things when she saw them. He said maybe this would work out after all. Jiho threw his hands in the air. He declared that they were all crazy. He said the universe had finally broken their minds. But then he walked to the pilot's seat and started the engines. He was not leaving. None of them were. Taeho felt gratitude fill his chest. These people were more than his crew. They were his family. And now, that family had a new member. The Wanderer lifted off from the nameless moon. The crashed Valorian ship grew smaller in the windows until it disappeared completely. Whatever had happened there was now in the past. The future was uncertain, but at least they were facing it together. The first night was difficult. Nari would not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's face. She saw the fire and the fear. She saw everything she wanted to forget, so she stayed awake, sitting on the bed, watching the humans move around the ship. Taeho stayed with her. He sat in a chair nearby, not too close but close enough. He talked to her in a quiet voice. Even though she did not understand his words, he told her about his life, about his childhood on Earth, about the stars he had visited. His voice was steady and calm, like water flowing over stones. Sometime before dawn, Nari fell asleep. She was still sitting up, still wrapped in the blanket and jacket. Taeho covered her gently and turned down the lights. He watched her breathe for a moment, making sure she was okay. Eunbi found him there in the morning. She brought 2 cups of coffee and handed one to him. They stood together, looking at the sleeping child. She asked Taeho if he knew what he was doing. It was not an accusation. It was a genuine question. She wanted to understand. Taeho sipped his coffee and thought about the answer. Finally, he admitted that he did not know. He had no plan. He had no experience with children. He had no idea how to raise an alien girl from a species he barely understood. But he knew that leaving her was wrong. He knew that some things were more important than rules and safety. He knew that being human meant making hard choices, even when those choices might destroy you. Eunbi nodded slowly. She said that was probably the most honest answer he could give. Then she finished her coffee and went to check the engines. Life on the ship continued, different now but still moving forward. Over the next few days, the crew learned to adjust. They walked quieter near the medical room where Nari slept. They lowered their voices when talking. They smiled at her whenever she peeked out from her blankets, even though she did not smile back. Jiho stopped complaining, though he still muttered about regulations when he thought no one was listening. Do-hun started researching Valorian culture on the ship's database, trying to learn anything that might help them understand Nari. Eunbi made a small toy from spare parts, a metal bird that moved its wings when you touched it. She left it on Nari's bed one morning. The child found it when she woke up. She stared at it for a long time, not touching. Then, very carefully, she poked it with one finger. The wings moved, and Nari jumped back in surprise. But she did not cry. Instead, she poked it again, and again. Each time, she watched the wings with growing wonder. It was a small thing, a tiny moment in an endless universe. But it meant everything. Taeho watched from the doorway, a smile on his tired face. They had made the right choice. He was sure of it now. Whatever came next, they would handle it. They were human. They were stubborn. They were full of foolish hope that refused to die. And that made all the difference. The first problem came quickly. Nari would not eat. Taeho tried everything on the ship. He offered her bread, but she turned away. He gave her fruit, but she would not touch it. He cooked rice and vegetables, the simplest food he could make. Nari just stared at it with her big violet eyes, then pushed the plate away. 3 days passed. The child grew weaker. She slept more and moved less. Her silver skin, once bright, began to look dull and gray. Eunbi checked her with the medical scanner and found nothing wrong. Her body was healthy. She was simply starving because she could not eat human food. Do-hoon searched the database for information about Valorian diet. He read for hours, scanning through old reports and scientific papers. Finally, he found something useful. Valorians did not eat solid food like humans. They absorbed nutrients through a special liquid made from plants that only grew on their home planet. The information hit them like a punch. Where would they find Valorian food in this part of the galaxy? Their people lived millions of light years away. Getting the right nutrients seemed impossible, but Taeho refused to give up. He contacted every trader he knew. He sent messages to old friends and former partners. He asked if anyone had heard of Valorian supplies, Valorian merchants, Valorian anything. Most messages went unanswered. Some came back with apologies. No one could help. No one had what he needed. Then, on the 5th day, a response came. An old woman named Suna, who ran a small supply station near the outer rim, said she might have something. Years ago, a Valorian ship had stopped at her station. They had traded some of their nutrient supplies for engine parts. She still had a few containers stored in her back room. They were old, but they might still be good. Taeho nearly cried with relief. He plotted a course immediately. The station was 2 days away at full speed. They pushed the Wanderer as hard as she could go. Nari grew weaker during the journey. She stopped sitting up. She lay on the bed, wrapped in blankets, her breathing shallow and slow. Taeho sat beside her. Holding her small hand, he talked to her constantly, promising that help was coming. He did not know if she understood, but he kept talking anyway. They reached the station just in time. Suna was waiting for them with 2 small containers of purple liquid. She warned Taeho that the supplies were expensive. The price she named was more than everything he owned. Taeho did not hesitate. He sold his collection of rare artifacts, pieces he had gathered over years of salvaging. He sold his spare equipment. He sold his emergency fuel reserves. He gave Suna everything until the debt was paid. Jiho watched in silence. Later, he asked Taeho if he understood what he had done. Without those resources, they were vulnerable. If something went wrong, they had nothing to fall back on. Taeho just looked at him and said that nothing mattered if Nari died. Resources could be found again. Money could be earned again. But a life lost was gone forever. They fed Nari the purple liquid slowly, drop by drop. At first, nothing happened. Then, after an hour, color began returning to her skin. She opened her eyes wider. She moved her hands. She was coming back to life. Eunbi cried with joy. Do-hoon laughed and cheered. Even Jiho smiled, though he tried to hide it. But the relief did not last long. A new problem was waiting. The next station they visited refused to let them dock. The security officer saw Nari through the window and immediately raised his weapon. He accused them of kidnapping. He threatened to call the authorities. He told them to leave or be arrested. Taeho tried to explain. He told the truth about finding Nari, about the crashed ship, about everything. The officer did not believe him. Why would a human take an alien child? It made no sense. It must be some kind of crime. They left the station without supplies, without fuel, without the repairs they desperately needed. Jiho was furious. He said this would happen everywhere. Humans were suspicious of aliens. Aliens were suspicious of humans. No one would help them. No one would understand. He was right. The next 3 stations turned them away. Some were polite about it. Others were hostile. One station owner threatened to shoot them if they did not leave immediately. Word was spreading. People were talking about the human ship carrying an alien child. Rumors grew and twisted. Some said Taeho had stolen the child. Some said he was selling her to scientists. Some said worse things that made Taeho sick to hear. Through all of this, Nari watched and listened. She was beginning to understand more of what was happening. She could not speak the human language yet, but she was learning to read faces and tones. She knew that people were angry. She knew that she was the reason. One night, She tried to leave. Teho found her at the ship's door, pressing buttons, trying to open it. She wanted to go. She wanted to take herself away so that the humans would not suffer because of her. Teho knelt beside her and gently moved her hands from the controls. He looked into her violet eyes and spoke slowly, clearly, hoping she would understand at least some of his words. He told her that she belonged here. He told her that she was not a burden. He told her that he would face any hardship, any danger, any enemy, as long as she was safe. He chose her. He would keep choosing her, every single day. Nari did not understand all the words, but she understood the feeling behind them. She saw the truth in his eyes. This strange human, with his rough hands and tired face, meant what he said. He would not abandon her. He would not give up. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his chest. It was a Valorian gesture of trust, something her mother used to do with her. Teho did not know what it meant, but he wrapped his arms around her and held her gently. They stayed like that for a long time. The struggles continued. Finding Valorian nutrients became a constant battle. Teho learned to track Valorian trading routes, to find the rare merchants who might have what he needed. He spent every credit he earned on supplies for Nari. His own meals became smaller. His own needs became secondary. Unbi noticed. She confronted Teho one evening in the engine room. She told him he was killing himself. She told him he needed to eat, to rest, to take care of his own health. How could he help Nari if he collapsed? Teho admitted she was right. He promised to be more careful, but they both knew it was a lie. He would always put Nari first. That was who he was now. Learning to communicate was the biggest challenge of all. Valorian language used sounds that human throats could not make. Human language used concepts that did not exist in Valorian thought. Every conversation was a puzzle, a game of gestures and expressions and patient repetition. Dohun became the teacher. He had a gift for languages, a natural ability to see patterns and make connections. He created a simple system of hand signals that both species could use. Slowly, word by word, Nari and the humans began to understand each other. The first full sentence Nari spoke in human language was simple. She pointed at the stars outside the window and asked what they were. Teho sat beside her and explained. He told her about suns and planets, about light traveling through space, about the endless mysteries that filled the universe. Nari listened with wonder in her eyes. Every word he spoke opened new doors in her mind. She had more questions after that. So many questions. Why did humans sleep lying down? Why did they eat solid food? Why did they make sounds when they were happy? Why did water fall from their eyes when they were sad? Teho answered everything as best he could. Some questions were easy. Some were hard. Some made him think about things he had never considered before. Teaching Nari about humanity made him understand his own species in new ways. Months passed. The Wanderer kept flying, visiting stations and colonies, taking whatever jobs they could find. They were still outcasts in many places, still refused and rejected. But they survived. They adapted. They found the small corners of the galaxy where people did not care about rules and regulations, where kindness still existed. Nari grew stronger. Her silver skin glowed bright again. Her violet eyes sparkled with curiosity and life. She was no longer the broken child from the crashed ship. She was becoming something new, something wonderful. But the universe was not done testing them. New challenges were coming, harder than anything they had faced before, and Teho would meet them all, because that was what fathers did. Even when the father was human and the daughter was not. 2 years had passed since the nameless moon. 2 years since Teho found a child holding her dead mother. 2 years since everything changed. Nari was growing. She was taller now, her silver body stretching like a young tree reaching for light. Her vocabulary expanded every day. She could hold conversations, tell jokes, even argue when she disagreed with something. She was becoming a person, full and complete, with her own thoughts and opinions and dreams. The crew of the Wanderer had changed too. They were no longer just salvagers. They were a family. Jiho still complained about regulations, but he taught Nari how to read star maps. Unbi showed her how machines worked, letting her help with simple repairs. Dohun played games with her, teaching her human songs and stories. But Taeho was the center of her world. Every morning, Nari waited for him to wake up. She would sit outside his door, patient and quiet, until she heard him moving. Then she would knock exactly 3 times. It was their signal, their special routine. Taeho would open the door and smile at her. He would say good morning, and she would say it back in her accented voice. Then they would walk together to the kitchen area for breakfast. Simple moments, ordinary moments, the kind of moments that build a life. One evening, Taeho was sitting alone in the observation room. The lights were dim, and the stars filled the window like scattered diamonds. He came here often to think, to remember, to feel small in the vastness of space. Nari found him there. She walked in silently, her feet making no sound on the metal floor. Valorians moved like ghosts, light and graceful. She sat down next to him without speaking. They watched the stars together for a while. The silence between them was comfortable, the kind of silence that only exists between people who truly know each other. Then Nari asked a question. Her voice was soft, hesitant, like she was afraid of the answer. She asked about her mother. Taeho felt his heart tighten. They had never talked about this. He had been waiting, knowing the conversation would come eventually, dreading it and preparing for it at the same time. He asked her what she wanted to know. Nari thought for a moment. Then she asked if her mother had suffered. She asked if the end had been painful. Taeho took a deep breath. He could lie. He could make up a gentle story about peaceful passing and instant release. But Nari deserved the truth. She was old enough now. She was strong enough. He told her he did not know for certain. He told her that when he found them, her mother was already gone. But he said that her mother's arms were wrapped around her, protecting her until the very last moment. Whatever happened, her mother's final act was love. Nari was quiet for a long time. Tears formed in her violet eyes, but she did not let them fall. She had learned something from the humans. She had learned that strength did not mean hiding emotions. It meant facing them. She thanked Taeho for telling her the truth. She said she was glad he was the one who found her. She said she was glad he did not leave her there. Taeho reached out and took her hand. He said he would never leave her. Not then. Not now. Not ever. Nari looked at him with those deep violet eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. She was struggling with something, trying to find the right words. Finally, she spoke. One word. Just one word. But it changed everything. Father. Taeho froze. His breath stopped. His eyes widened. Had he heard correctly? Had she really said what he thought she said? Nari saw his reaction and suddenly looked scared. She started to apologize, speaking quickly, stumbling over her words. She said she was sorry if she was wrong. She said she knew he was not really her father. She said she understood if he did not want her to call him that. Taeho pulled her into his arms before she could say another word. He held her tight against his chest, feeling her small heart beating fast. Tears were streaming down his face now. And he did not care. He told her she could call him that. He told her he would be honored. He told her that blood did not make family. Love made family. Choice made family. And he chose her. He had chosen her from the moment he picked her up on that moon. He would choose her every day for the rest of his life. Nari buried her face in his shoulder and cried. Not sad tears this time. Happy tears. Relief tears. The tears of someone who finally found where they belonged. The rest of the crew heard about it later. Unbi hugged Nari so tight that the girl squeaked. Do-hoon made a big show of welcoming his new little sister. Even Jiho patted Nari on the head and said something about family being important. That night, they had a celebration. Do-hoon found some sweets at a recent station, and Unbi made a special dinner. They laughed and talked and told stories late into the night. The wanderer felt warmer than it ever had before. Life continued after that. But something was different. Nari walked with more confidence. She smiled more. She laughed louder. The shadow that had always lurked behind her eyes was fading. She was healing. Teho watched her grow with pride and wonder. She was so smart, so curious, so eager to learn about everything. She asked questions that made him think hard. She saw things from angles he had never considered. Being her father was teaching him as much as he was teaching her. One day, Nari asked about Earth. She wanted to know about the place Teho came from, the home of humanity. He had mentioned it before, in passing, but never in detail, so he told her everything. He described the blue oceans and green forests. He talked about the cities full of people, the mountains covered with snow, the deserts that stretched for endless miles. He told her about seasons changing, about rain falling from the sky, about the moon that looked down on it all. Nari listened with wide eyes. She asked if they could go there someday. She wanted to see where her father grew up. She wanted to walk on the ground, where humans first learned to walk. Teho smiled and said maybe. Earth was far away, and the journey would be long. But nothing was impossible. If she wanted to go, they would find a way. Another time, Nari asked about other humans. She had met many on stations and colonies, but she never really talked to them. Most looked at her with suspicion or fear. She wanted to know if all humans were like that. Teho thought carefully before answering. He told her that humans were complicated. Some were kind, like the crew of the Wanderer. Some were afraid of things they did not understand. Some were cruel for no reason at all. But he said that most humans, deep down, wanted to be good. They just forgot sometimes. They just got lost in their fears and troubles. Nari nodded slowly. She said she would try to remember that. She said she would try to see the good in people, even when they could not see it themselves. Teho felt his heart swell with pride. This child, this alien girl who had lost everything, had more wisdom and compassion than many humans he had known. The months turned into another year. Nari continued to grow, to learn, to become. She was 9 years old now, in human terms, though Valorians aged differently. She was becoming bilingual, switching between Valorian and human language with ease. She helped with ship duties, learning to navigate and repair and communicate. She also started keeping a journal. Every night, she wrote about her day, about her thoughts, about her memories. She wrote about her mother, trying to keep those memories alive. She wrote about Teho and the crew, recording all the small moments that made up their life together. Teho found her writing one evening and asked what she was doing. Nari showed him the journal shyly. She said she wanted to remember everything. She said she never wanted to forget how lucky she was. He hugged her and told her she was the lucky one. He said finding her was the best thing that ever happened to him. He said she gave his life meaning and purpose. Nari hugged him back and whispered that he was the best father in the whole galaxy. In that moment, surrounded by stars and silence, Teho knew that everything he had sacrificed was worth it. Every credit spent, every hardship faced, every risk taken. All of it led to this. All of it led to her. The bond between them was unbreakable now. Stronger than metal. Deeper than space. It was forged in tragedy and tempered by time. It would last forever. Whatever the future held, they would face it as father and daughter. That was all that mattered. 15 years had passed since the nameless moon. The Galactic Council chamber was enormous. It floated in space like a silver crown, home to representatives from 100 different species. The walls were made of transparent metal, showing the stars in every direction. The floor was polished stone brought from a dozen worlds. Everything here was designed to show power and importance. Nari stood at the speaker's platform, looking out at the assembled delegates. She was tall now, her silver skin glowing under the lights. Her violet eyes were calm and steady. Her dark purple hair was tied back in a formal style. She wore the traditional robes of a Valorian diplomat, marking her heritage and her position. She was Ambassador Nari of the Valorian people, the youngest ambassador in galactic history, the first person to hold citizenship in two different species. The council was debating the human question. For years, humanity had been isolated, kept at the edges of galactic society. They were considered too young, too aggressive, too unpredictable. Many species wanted to keep them contained. Some wanted to cut contact entirely. Today, Nari would speak in their defense. The chamber fell silent as she stepped forward. 100 different eyes watched her, waiting. Some looked curious. Some looked hostile. Some looked bored, expecting another political speech full of empty words. Nari took a deep breath and began. She did not start with statistics or arguments. She started with a story. She told them about a child on a nameless moon. She told them about a crashed ship and a dead mother. She told them about the cold and the fear and the darkness that seemed endless. Then she told them about the human who found her. His name was Teho, she said. He was a salvager, a nobody in the grand scheme of things. He had no power, no wealth, no important connections. He was just a man flying through space, looking for scraps to survive. But when he found a dying alien child, he did not walk away. He did not call the authorities and forget about her. He picked her up, carried her to his ship, and changed her life forever. The council listened in silence. Some faces showed surprise. They had not expected this kind of story. Nari continued. She described the struggles they faced. She talked about stations refusing them entry, about the constant search for food she could eat, about the money Teho spent to keep her alive. She talked about the crew who stayed despite the risks, about the small family they built on a ship called the Wanderer. She talked about learning to speak, to trust, to love again. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. This was not just a political argument anymore. This was her truth, her life. Her heart laid bare before the galaxy. She asked the council a question. She asked them what they knew about humans. Had they met any? Had they talked to them? Or did they only know the reports and rumors, the fears and prejudices passed down through generations? Many delegates shifted uncomfortably. The truth was obvious. Most of them had never spoken to a human. Most of them only knew what they had been told. Nari nodded slowly. She said that was the problem. Fear of the unknown. Judgment without knowledge. It was the oldest mistake in the universe. And every species had made it at some point. She said humans were not perfect. They fought wars. They made mistakes. They could be cruel and selfish and blind to their own flaws. But they could also be kind. They could sacrifice everything for a stranger. They could choose love when hate was easier. She told them about Teho sitting on the floor of a crashed ship, waiting patiently for a scared child to trust him. She told them about him selling everything he owned to buy food for her. She told them about him holding her when she cried, teaching her when she was confused, protecting her when the universe tried to tear her away. That was humanity, she said. Not the wars or the weapons, the choice to care, the stubborn refusal to give up on someone who needed help. A delegate from the Korvax species interrupted. His voice was cold and sharp. He asked why one human's actions should change anything. One good person did not represent an entire species. There were criminals and killers among humans too. Nari met his eyes without flinching. She agreed that one person did not represent everyone. But she asked him to consider something. Teho was not special. He was not trained for kindness. He was not selected or tested or approved. He was ordinary, random, just another human among billions. And yet, when faced with a choice, he chose compassion. If an ordinary human could do that, she said, then compassion lived in their species. It was part of who they were. Not always, not in everyone, but it was there, waiting to be chosen. She asked the council if they could say the same about their own species. If any of them, walking alone on a distant moon, would have made the same choice Teho made. The chamber was silent. No one answered. Nari let the silence stretch. Then she spoke again, softer now. She told them about the day she first called Teho her father. She described his tears, his joy, his fierce promise to never leave her. She told them about the years that followed, about watching him grow old while she stayed young, about knowing that their time together was limited by human lifespan. Teho was an old man now, she said. His hair was gray. His hands shook sometimes. He could not fly ships anymore. But his eyes still sparkled when he looked at her. His voice still carried the same warmth it had on that first day. He was the reason she stood here today. He was the reason she believed in bridges between species. He was the reason she had hope. She asked the Council to give humanity a chance, not because they were perfect, but because they could be better, not because they deserved it, but because the galaxy needed to believe that compassion could cross the boundaries between species. Her voice rang through the chamber. If we turn away from humanity, she said, we turn away from the possibility of change. We say that species are fixed, that kindness cannot spread, that the universe is cold and will always be cold. Is that what we believe? Is that who we want to be? She stepped back from the platform. Her speech was finished. She had said everything she could say. Now the decision belonged to others. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Delegates argued and questioned and calculated. Old prejudices clashed with new perspectives. The future hung in the balance. When the vote finally came, it was close. So close that Nari held her breath until the last result was counted. Humanity was accepted. Not full membership, not yet. But a path forward. A chance to prove themselves. An open door, where before, there had been only walls. Nari walked out of the council chamber, feeling lighter than she had in years. She had done it. Not alone, of course. Many others had worked for this moment. But she had played her part. She had spoken her truth. A communication request appeared on her device. She answered it and saw a familiar face. Teho smiled at her from the screen, his gray hair messy, his eyes bright with tears. He had watched the speech. Everyone had watched. It was broadcast across the galaxy. He told her he was proud of her. He said her mother would have been proud too. He said she had become something amazing, something he could never have imagined when he found her on that moon. Nari smiled back at him. She said she learned everything from him. She said that whatever she had become, he had built the foundation. Teho shook his head. He said she built herself. He just gave her a place to stand. They talked for a while longer, about small things, about memories, about the future. The galaxy was changing. Humans would join the community of species. New relationships would form, new possibilities would open. But for Nari, the most important thing remained the same. Across all the distance, across all the years, the bond between her and her father remained unbroken. Before ending the call, Teho said something he had said 1,000 times before. 3 simple words that meant everything. I love you. Nari said them back. Then the screen went dark, and she stood alone in the corridor of the council station. Around her, the stars burned bright and eternal. The universe was vast and cold, and did not care about one small girl or one old human man. But that did not matter. Love was enough. It had always been enough. She touched the pendant around her neck, a small piece of metal from the Wanderer. Yunbi had made it for her years ago, a reminder of home, a piece of the ship where she had learned to live again. Ambassador Nari of the Valorian people walked forward into the future, carrying the past with her. Behind her, the door to a new era slowly opened, and somewhere, light years away, an old human salvager looked up at the stars and smiled. His daughter had changed the galaxy, all because he made a choice on a nameless moon, 15 years ago, to pick up a child and carry her home.